In a fascist system, like in a communist system, the government is in control of industry, capital, and the economic system. But the goal of the collection of this money is not equal distribution among the body politic.
Mhm.
It is of distribution disproportionately to individuals who are ideologically aligned with whatever ideology the system's looking to promote. So instead of
Mm.
complete equality, the system is designed entirely around promoting a specific ideological and cultural framework. If that fascist believes their goal to serve their political party is to redistribute the capital of the state to promote the ideological interests of that community, or to individuals based on their ideological affiliation, or to certain ethnic groups that are above other ethnic groups, right? Basically, they have decided that certain ethnic groups are more deserving of human dignity than other ethnic groups, and therefore it's the job of the state to care for those groups. I mean, that's fascism 101. And the reason Germans targeted the Jews was because they were disproportionately economically successful,
Mm.
more economically successful than other groups, as a justification for the dehumanization of that group and blaming that group for all of the problems that their society was having. Well, this becomes a problem because that's exactly what the progressive movement does.
Would you like to know more?
I am so excited to be talking to you today, Simone. What we are going to talk about today is fascism as a concept, because a lot of
Mm.
people have gotten overly focused on like dictionary definitions of fascism, which I
Mm.
do not think are particularly useful, or like leftist definitions of fascism. One of the, famous here, we have our great episode on Starship Troopers if you want to see it. But for leftists to call that world of fascist universe or world is just like nonsensical. Like nothing about it other than literally just the aesthetics fit any historical definition of fascism.
Mm.
And it's like, so like is fascism just politics you disagree with and like dressing sexy? Like, is that literally like, do you have no concept that fascism actually needs to be like a unique political and economic system to exist?
No,
And I
Malcolm, dressing sharp and being attractive means that you're a fascist. Hello.
Right? Having patriotism. So I've been playing Helldivers 2 recently, which is actually pretty fun. I might like try to start a Discord as a server group. I'll add the Discord server thing here for people who are doing that. That'd be a fun thing to do together. But it's done very much in a Starship Troopersy world, right? And people no, actually I almost want to do a separate episode, which I will do, on their concept of managed democracy,
Mm.
because it works different from fascism, but
Okay.
it's also different from what we would think of as democracy, insofar as like your vote. They're like, oh, imagine a world where everyone could just vote for whoever they feel like. Like, wouldn't that be silly? Like, I'm very interested to see who the algorithm chooses as my next candidate that I'm voting for. So they vote by like hitting a button that says vote, and then an algorithm determines who they're voting for. I think
Huh.
based on their interest as an individual, was the idea being that individuals, it's actually a really interesting concept for us
Oh,
to
so
go
like I want my
deeper
voice to
into.
be heard and the algorithms already understand all my values and stated preferences and therefore
And they can decide better than I can who I
okay.
would have voted for, because it doesn't really make sense for individuals to become
Honestly,
over
that
invested.
sounds amazing because people don't know anything about their candidates these days.
It's completely called a personality stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yes, for managed democracy, spread
Oh.
throughout the galaxy. Anyway, but with Starship Troopers, it's not even that. Like the only change they have is that you need to make some sacrifice to vote. And this sacrifice can be military service or civil service. You like people think it's only military service. No, in the books it's also civil service. And in the movie, that's not explicitly stated that civil service can't make you a citizen. So we have to assume that it exists in this universe, given that it's in the source material, which just means that what they're freaking out about, and I always say, like, this is so telling on the left, that they hate this world where all of the things they tell everyone they're trying to achieve have already been achieved. This is the universe that has gender equality. This is the universe that has ethnic equality. This is a universe that has sexual equality. This is even a universe where religions are suppressed to an extent, as
Yeah,
we
it's
learn
it's the
in this
shared
Starship
locker
Troopers.
rooms that everyone's been going for ages. I don't
Yeah.
get it.
So why did they hate it? It's because it never was really about equality. It's always been
Mhm.
about not working, and that the universe demands some level of sacrifice to vote because something given without anything in exchange has no value. It's as the
Mm.
movie says, and which is actually true. If you can vote without having to sacrifice for that vote, you treat the vote trivially for a lot of people, and it was assumed that we would always remember the sacrifice that was given for our vote, but a lot of people don't anymore. They don't understand the people who suffered and sacrificed, or they don't care about those people. They devalue them. They say that they were bad people for having non-modern views of morality.
The bigger ones, they just don't think about him at all.
But I want to get to fascism specifically.
Let's
What
do it.
is fascism as a political and economic system?
Okay.
So, capitalism. So I'm going to divide these into three core political systems and three core economic systems. Capitalism is a system where, it's probably easier to start with communism.
Okay.
Communism is a system where all of the industrial productivity of a nation is primarily under the control of the governing body of that civilization or country, and is then redistributed equally among the population.
Mhm.
So the idea is that the people who are at the highest levels of sort of all economics of a system receive all of the wealth that they want from that system. Now they can divide it in different ways. So you can look at something like the Chinese system, which we will argue whether it's fully communist or not. But I think within a communist system, it is still reasonable to say we will rent out this thing, or we will sell these things that we have produced to another country in order to distribute to the average man what we earn, right? It's not to say that they never engage with the market economy. It's just that any engagement with the market economy is meant to serve this goal of maximum equal distribution to the common man. Capitalist systems are systems in which there is, and this is like true, like within every one of these, I'm discussing like the paragon of this system, right? Not the way they're ever really implemented in reality, because the US wouldn't fit this definition, where the organizational structure of what is generating industry in a country is free forming and allows organizations within it to grow and then die because they were outcompeted by like new competitive organizations that are more efficient than them. So it's basically a completely decentralized approach to how industry and capital are generated within a state, with the idea being that that approach is just so efficient that it uplifts everyone within the state more than a centrally planned system.
Hmm.
And that it distributes economic resources in industrial capacity to those individuals who are the most competent within a system. And this is often like true. These systems do end up wealthier than other systems. And when people convert to these systems, they often do end up wealthier. So there is an increase in efficiency, but
Mhm.
a decrease in sort of how capital and everything is distributed. Now, a fascist system is a lot closer to a communist system, and that the state, the governing body, can control any industry,
Mhm.
any capital allocation within the country. But the goal of that control is different than the goal of the control within a communist system. And so they often choose to exercise this power very differently than the people within communist systems exercise.
Mm. It sounds like the difference between a helicopter parent and a very strict, but otherwise culturally very independence supporting parent.
I don't know if I agree with that analogy, but okay. Anyway, the point being is that in a fascist system, like in a communist system, the government is in control of industry, capital, and the economic system. But the goal of the collection of this money is not equal distribution among the body politic.
Mhm.
It is of distribution disproportionately to individuals who are ideologically aligned with whatever ideology the system's looking to promote. So instead of
Mm.
complete equality, the system is designed entirely around promoting a specific ideological and cultural framework.
I see what you're saying now. Okay.
So that can be either to like arts and stuff like that are designed to promote a specific ideological framework, or it can be an unequal distribution within the body politic where that inequality elevates either certain ethnic groups or certain groups dependent on their political beliefs.
Mm.
And when you divide the three systems this way, the division becomes quite meaningful from like a philosophical and economic perspective, and most fascist systems from history would fall very squarely into this final category. Now, the state within fascist systems often allows for a bit more capitalistic action, i.e., a bit more free forming of bodies and institutions underneath it, because it is just more interested in grabbing as much capital as possible, and those systems generate more capital than the communist systems. However, most communist systems actually end up drifting more towards fascist-like systems over time as the political class begins to define their values and their class as more important than other people, which means that now they get a disproportionate share of the resources. You know, some animals are more equal than others. It's a really, honestly, great line from the book that's so good at describing, yes, we're all equal, but some of us are a bit more equal than others, which is redefining equality to mean those with ideological power within the community.
Mhm.
Now, this all becomes really important when you understand what fascism is through this lens, is that it makes it easier and not an arbitrary thing to call a system fascist. Because right now, calling something fascist has, as I pointed out with the Starship Troopers thing, it's become like an aesthetic thing. It's like, I disagree with you, therefore you are a fascist.
Yeah, it's like calling someone racist or a Nazi.
Mm. But this also allows a fascist system, which is really important because it's also true with communist and capitalist systems. They can arise within complete democracies. You, within a democracy, can vote for a fascist. If that fascist, or if that individual, that politician who you've elected, believes their goal to serve their political party is to redistribute the capital of the state to promote the ideological interests of that community, or to individuals based on their ideological affiliation, or to certain ethnic groups that are above other ethnic groups, right?
Mhm.
Whereas in a democracy, you can have a totally communistic system. You could vote and then have the people in power say, our goal is to distribute capital as equally as possible among the body politic, right?
Mm.
Well, this becomes really interesting because if you take this framework, which I actually think is a very good and useful framework, and you apply it to our modern political system, the Democratic Party and the progressive value system is an almost, while it is rare to have pure expressions of any one of these three systems, it is almost a totally pure expression of fascism.
Hmm.
Um, in that they believe their goal is to promote this ultra progressive urban monoculture, and that they should distribute cash, like the government should distribute cash throughout a society, but it should distribute them to certain ethnicities and cultural groups that it sees as being more human or more deserving of human dignity than other cultural groups. And you can
That's
see this
fascinating.
with,
Universal basic income?
yes. So San Francisco has experimented with some universal basic income systems, except they only give it to certain ethnic groups and certain minority populations.
Oh.
So basically, they have decided that certain ethnic groups are more deserving of human dignity than other ethnic groups, and therefore it's the job of the state to care for those groups. I mean, that's fascism 101. And I think that people, they're like, no, 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 that's not like Germany. Germany was targeting, people because they weren't. It's like, no, the reason Germans targeted the Jews was because they were disproportionately economically successful,
Mm.
and they used that. And you can see this. There's like great stats. If you want to go into all the stats into this, because we actually go over it in the Pragmatist Guide to Crafting Religion, if you think Jews pre the Holocaust were some like poor group in Germany that had no either economic or political power, that just does not coincide with the data that we have. They were vastly more likely, like orders of magnitude more likely, to have jobs like doctors and bankers and stuff like that were high paying within this world. And we can look at the data on this. And they used that, the fact that one group had been more economically successful than other groups as a justification for the dehumanization of that group and blaming that group for all of the problems that their society was having. Well, this becomes a problem because that's exactly what the progressive movement does. They'll say, oh, well, white cis men have run our country forever and they have all the economic resources and they have all the whatever success, and therefore we are justified in making it difficult for that group to get jobs, it was in social media lynching that group. And people can underestimate. They're like, oh, they're not really destroying them. When you take someone who's the primary income earner of a large family and you destroy their ability to get a job and you downplay the effects of doing that, that is genuinely evil. This is a huge thing to do to someone.
Well, and I think what people are missing somehow, because fascism has been villainized for so long aesthetically and in general, is I think people are under the impression that if one is in a fascist system, everyone knows that they're doing a bad thing. And they're like, yeah, we're going to bully those people. We're so mean
Mhm.
to them. Ha ha ha. Isn't it funny how pathetic they are? Whereas really, it looks like what we're feeling now, which
Is
is,
that not
oh,
the way progressives see conservatives? Ha
yeah,
ha
this,
ha, we're
this,
gonna bully these people. Look at how pathetic they are.
well, it's more like this victimized group. We are these victims, and these people are ruining everything. We need to correct it.
Mm,
That's what's happening.
Fascist systems always believe, at least in the early days, that they are being victimized by some
Mhm.
other group
And that
that
they
is
have to
more
correct that
economically
victimization,
successful
that they
than them.
have to right the wrongs, they have to correct the injustice.
Yeah, and this is actually really interesting that when you like understand the core difference between fascism and communism and capitalism, you understand that the modern progressive movement is the purest manifestation of fascism that can exist. I mean, they are as pure fascism as Mussolini or Hitler. And when you attack these communities, and people can be like, oh, come on, they wouldn't kill people who fall into these communities that they're dehumanizing. And it's like, do you not like this is one of those things that happened was in the early Jewish communities. And I have a friend who this happened to is he read, when I say friend, it was the grandfather of a girl I was dating in high school. And he read Mein Kampf and he went around to his community and he's saying, he's saying he wants to literally kill us. Like you see this, right? And they thought he was a crazy person and he ended up having to break in and kidnap his girlfriend in the middle of the night and broke the house's window and took her out. I can only imagine the parents waking up the next day and they're gone. It was the right choice. Everyone in his community was killed, but it was he was seen as quite insane. Today, when I say things like go on to these Twitter communities, look at what people are saying, even who are thought leaders in these groups who talk about killing men, who talk about killing cisgendered men, who talk about killing white people. This is something you will see in these communities among their political organizers very, very frequently. For you to say that they would never actually act on that is very similar to those in these Jewish communities in the early, but they're like, they never actually act. Yeah, oh yeah, he wrote Mein Kampf, but
Well, it's this mixture of both dehumanizing the group that you see to be systematically unfair and also believing them to be causing genuine harm that must be corrected on a societal level. And if not corrected, will lead to unending harm. Right.
yeah,
I think that's the view. And you can look at that and you can see it in
and
Nazi
that's how
Germany. And you
fascism
can look
works
at that and you can
ideologically.
see it today.
Yeah. No, I want to elevate what you just said there because I think that it is really important, right? The key to fascism is identifying specific groups in society. This is one of the ways that fascists rise to power and say this group is causing harm in our society, this ideological group often, and therefore they must be gotten rid of because harm will continue to come to our society until they are erased.
Mhm.
And that morally justifies behavior that you might think that your neighbors could never morally justify. And yet we are already well on the path towards true and total fascism within leftist circles. And I think that people don't see how dangerous things are getting because Nazism specifically has been used hyperbolically for so long.
Mm.
And people can be like, come on, look at this. What is it, like sea to ocean language that you see on college campuses now and stuff like that, right? Or river
No,
to
from the
sea,
river to the sea.
from the river to the sea language, which literally means we need to wipe out all of the Jews in Israel. You see them elevating this kind of language and it being normalized. I mean, kids in colleges like Harvard are going around marching this stuff and not being expelled from school. If you think that they treat all groups as equal, if they said this about a Muslim population, they'd be expelled. If they said this about an LGBT population, they'd be expelled. They are converging on the anti-Semitism that most fascists in histories converge around, but they are including additional groups alongside that anti-Semitism that historically weren't included. But what I would say is they intend to target you. If you're like, yeah, but I'm a good white cis man. No.
Yeah, but also, again, they think that they're doing the right thing. They think that they're the goodies and not the baddies because
Nobody, the Nazis didn't think they were the bad guys.
I know, exactly. I think it's really hard for people to wrap their
realize
heads
when
around
they
that.
are genuinely the face of evil.
Well,
If
but
you
okay, so
look-
that they can be the face of evil, but that they are firmly convinced that they are good people doing the right thing, who are empathetic, who feel deeply for the populations that they are trying to protect, and who see the populations that they are victimizing and harming as the unfeeling, as the enemy. And we have to think about that a little bit more
well, no,
carefully
because this is the difference, right? You have populations like us where you are able to empathize, at least to a large extent, with progressives, right? Like you're like, they're still human, they're just making mistakes. But at a certain point, you need to say they're like, you need to recognize what the long-term consequence of this political framework is.
I'm all for addressing this kind of myopic and delusional viewpoint with extreme strictness and having a zero
I don't think
tolerance policy,
strictness.
but
I
I'm
think
also not for dehumanizing the other side
no,
because
I
the
know, I
core element
agree,
of
but
this
I
is
think that you need to call out what their actual politics are.
yeah,
And I think that this is
but you
something.
can't engage someone mentally and call them out in a way that they will actually hear if you are doing that while dehumanizing them.
Yeah, but I think that they're literally Nazis at this point. And now you could say, oh, calling them literally Nazis at this point is dehumanizing them because you see Nazis as less than human. But I would say that the
When
people
people
who
call us
regard
Nazis online, do we spend a lot of time consuming their content and trying to hear their arguments?
Simone, I don't think that once somebody has fully bought into this cult, that they're ever going to hear any outside perspective. They don't see us as fully human. No, you cannot.
They're capable of seeing us as fully human. So what in the book How Minds Change, the general thesis of how people actually have their minds changed with very offensive things, things along these lines where you think that there's no cure, there's no solution, is first you get two people to bond as humans in some way, find common ground before they ever talk about the subject, to develop some kind of rapport, and then they start discussing it, but in the other person's terms.
Yeah, but here's the point, okay?
Okay.
The ways that fascist ideologies prevent that from happening, prevent people from being deconverted, is they create systems where if you are seen as talking with the enemy group, you are just as bad as that enemy
That's
group.
true. And
In
this is something
Nazi
that really showed
Germany,
up at the
this was
Natalism
done.
conference, right?
If
And
you
the organizers tried so hard to bring in progressive demographers, anyone who was left leaning, who was looking at demographic collapse or population shifts. And for the life of them, they could not get a single one to show up, which is pretty telling. And I think to your point, right, that they will simply not be willing to even associate. And people on Twitter constantly hounded us saying, do you know who's going to this conference? Don't you, white supremacists are going to this conference, the wrong people are going to this conference. And we're like, yeah, well, so, so
But
I
this
think you're right. That is
this
true.
is
And that's a big
how
problem.
fascism works. This is what the Nazis did. They said, if you engage with these communities, especially if you engage with them as equal, like Jews, etc., then you are just as bad as them. And that is how they prevent people from within their circle from realizing that these others are still human.
Yeah, I
Um,
think, I mean, that it is fair. What I'm suggesting is actually to be actively misleading and to not let people know who you are and what you stand for, which is, I guess, part of what BreadTube was all about, right? So, okay, that's not, I guess, what upper-handed of me. It's not.
when it doesn't work. Because
Yeah.
if they don't know what you stand for, then they can't humanize the other group. If they don't have that
Well, no, no,
moment
no. What
in
I'm
their
saying is first disguise yourself as someone who's on their side, then get to know them, and then once you have rapport, introduce them to your ideas, which is how groups on all sides
no,
of the
then they
spectrum have
report you.
manipulated other
Like,
groups.
that's an insane thing to do. Because then they're like, "Oh, somebody's been trying to," they report you to, like, their Gestapo. And this is also really interesting, as I've been reading more about the history of the CIA, the FBI, etcetera. These
Mhm.
organizations were never supposed to exist long term. Even Truman, the guy who created it, said that he regretted doing it because these were only supposed to exist in wartime.
Mm.
And the reason is because when you have a group that's not fully accountable to the American government operating in silence, these groups can become ideologically captured, which we're already seeing with wokeism within these groups, right? Is they're becoming more and more woke. The individuals I know within them, and they are being used, like within the Sweet Baby Inc. controversy, that government money is being used to support Sweet Baby Inc. right now,
Oh,
right?
that's
And
scary.
organizations defending it. It shows that they have become so ideologically captured that now they see their purpose as like a secret police that has access to all of your communications in this country, enforcing ideological conformity
Yikes.
and elevating the dehumanization of other people. Because as anyone knows, the CEO of Sweet Baby Inc., she said that her worst nightmare was waking up as a white male gamer. Like, she sees that as being such an underclass that she could not even imagine. Yeah.
Well, it's a lot harder now to get hired as um, cis white male in
No, it's
general.
basically impossible within the bureaucratic world these days.
Yeah. Now, of course, if you
Or
want
at least
to
at
go into a
anything
trade or
close to your
something.
degree level. And people who haven't gone out there and tried, like, Simone and I, because we have similar resumes, mine's significantly stronger than hers, by the
Yeah,
way.
similar is
Um,
not really correct because you have a wildly better resume than I do, and
and
we've
and
applied to
yet
the same
you get
jobs.
literally 3x the job offers I get. It's
Yeah,
not even comparable
yeah.
anymore. It is you need to work twice as hard for the same amount of success. And I think a lot of people are like, well, then I just give up. They don't give up. This is your opportunity to shine. Many groups throughout history have been discriminated against.
Mm.
And if you bow out just because you're discriminated against by the powers that be, then, well, I guess you don't deserve to exist in the future, which is the way the system
Well,
works.
this is why groups like that end up essentially producing the people who build society because they're faced with so many selective pressures.
Well, and that's why historically immigrants in the US have created most of our new companies and stuff like that, because when you can't
Mm.
get mainstream jobs, you end up creating new companies. And what they're forcing to have happen is predominantly white cis men are going to create most of the companies in this country going forwards
I
because they're not
mean,
going to get mainstream jobs.
yeah, they're being forced to. So yeah, all this stuff about who built history and present about that. They weren't given
Um,
other options. They weren't allowed to marry and be safe.
and
They
I
weren't
should
allowed
point out,
to.
it's not just white; it's also black cis males. It's
No, yeah,
also
yeah.
gay males. It's also, if you have any one of these negative traits, negative traits, you're on the chopping block, right?
Well, anyway, that is very interesting. You've made me look at progressive culture with even more concern. You're gonna have to pay for my Botox someday. This furrowed brow, it's your fault.
Your laugh lines is what I think the bigger
It's
issue.
true. Oh my God, I love life with you. At least we have that. And I think a lot of it comes down to building parallel economies, just going a different way and finding safe, fortified land. I don't know, but I'm still very hopeful.
I love you to death, Simone. I have enjoyed chatting with you as always.
Hmm.
Today is, so we record these in batches. So I mentioned this on a few other episodes, but we only just launched our, what is that thing called?
Discord server, thanks
Discord
to a
server.
fan's
Sorry, I know so
effort.
little about this stuff, but I was so excited to see that we're already at like the 53 active members at just a random time when I joined. 163 people have joined. Like, this is cool. Like, it's an actual community, and it makes me happy to see that people are discussing and engaging things on there, and I'm able to like drop potential title cards and ask people which one should I use for today's episode. And because usually I'm doing that with you, Simone, and now I won't need to bug you as much because they came to
Yeah.
the same conclusion you did. And so now I can leave you alone more. And yeah. Anyway, I love you to death. You are an amazing human.
I love you too, Malcolm.
Have a great day. Oh, and anyone who uses is like a Wikipedia editor, we really need a Wikipedia page. You can learn more about us at .org. That's where we have like a link list of all the press links. We've been in like tons and tons and tons of major media. I don't know why we don't have one yet. I think it's just an initiative thing at this point. Love you.
Hey, Malcolm, isn't it kind of funny where before when I asked if you wanted a quickie, you knew that it was something a little sexy, and now it's a podcast?
Yeah, do we have time for a
For a
quick
quickie.
podcast?
Yeah.
But
But by the way, before we even start, I just have to say you are the MVP of the day. You had 3 very rambunctious kids that you managed to take to change tires, go shopping, get chicken feed, and they were so happy. So anyway, you rock. I just want you
well,
to know.
I'm moving all this to the end because this is not going to be good for SEO to have random conversation at the beginning. But